Step into the covert world of espionage, where every glance may be a lie, and every touch could be the beginning of betrayal. These gripping stories expose the ruthless chessboard of intelligence operations, where honeypot seductions, silent assassinations, and covert missions unfold in the shadows. In a realm where governments weaponize secrets and human weakness is the ultimate vulnerability, operatives are seduced, manipulated, and turned into pawns for the enemy. Each tale explores the personal cost of deception, the fragility of loyalty, and the blurred lines between love, power, and survival. Welcome to the world where trust is a liability, and betrayal is just another move in the game. Thank you for listening to Seduce and Extract. The Asset. Part 1. Special Security Officer Maria Angela Romano stood silently in the corner of the secure briefing room, deep within the Defense Intelligence Agency's main building at Joint Base Anacostia Bowling. The dim, sterile lighting from overhead fluorescents mingled with the flickering blue glow of operational displays, casting sharp, shifting shadows across her fitted dark blazer. Her posture was textbook spine straight, arms at ease, feet shoulder-width apart, reflecting the discipline drilled into her over the years. But inside, her mind churned. The moment she had stepped into the sensitive, compartmented information facility, she'd sensed it. Director Wainwright, usually composed and methodical, had greeted her without pleasantries. His voice was lower than usual, and every word was deliberate, tight with gravity. Maria didn't need a dossier to tell her this wasn't just a procedural deployment. No, this had weight. Operational weight, strategic implications. And as she stood there, eyes fixed on the digital map of the Baltic Sea region glowing on the wall display, the creeping feeling in her gut sharpened into certainty. Something bigger was brewing. She just didn't know yet how close it already was. Director Charles Wainwright, a tall, graying man known for his restraint and precision, stood at the head of the briefing table and motioned toward the wall-mounted screen. The image of an industrial complex appeared, Swartz Global Shipping's main terminal in Kotka, Finland. Its buildings highlighted in red overlays, the fourth floor outlined with a pulsing yellow frame. Swartz Global Shipping, he began, his voice even but edged with urgency, is a black-site NSA and DIA jointly operated as a SIGINT collection hub. Officially, it's a maritime logistics company. Unofficially, it houses some of our most sensitive listening posts in the Baltic Theater. 36 hours ago, we intercepted a signal sweep originating from inside the facility. He turned to face Maria, locking eyes. It was faint, unsanctioned. The original location point is on the fourth floor, in the restricted, sensitive, compartmented information facility, access only. No scheduled transmissions. No logged diagnostics. We need to know if this was a misfired systems check or a deliberate breach. Maria narrowed her eyes as she took a small step forward. What level of access will I have? Full SSO, he said. Your credentials are already activated. Local cooperation from the Finns will be limited. They're walking a tightrope with Moscow. They'll support, but quietly. We're not ruling out internal compromise. In fact, we're concerned this might be a coordinated infiltration attempt. Her fingers drummed once against the sealed manila folder in her hand, absorbing the weight of what lay inside. Floor plans, personnel lists, comms traffic logs. Layers of secrecy about a site only a handful of people in the intelligence community even knew existed. She gave a sharp nod. I'll handle it. Wainwright's eyes lingered on her face for a second longer than usual, as if silently confirming to himself that she was still the right one for this kind of job, precise, unshakable, and fiercely loyal. Wheels up at 2100 hours, he said. Pack for cold, and Maria, trust no one over there until we know what we're dealing with. Understood, she replied, already turning to leave, her mind beginning to catalog every possible scenario. As Maria stepped out of the briefing room and into the corridor, the heavy door sealed behind her with a quiet metallic thud, isolating the classified tension she was leaving behind. The echo of her heels clicked down the tiled floor as she exhaled, mentally shifting gears for the mission ahead. Just then, her phone buzzed softly in the inside pocket of her blazer. She retrieved it and glanced down. Dinner tonight at La Grande Boucherie. Reservations at 7 p.m. She paused mid-stride, staring at the message. A flicker of warmth crossed her face. It was so like Robert. His timing impeccable, almost unnervingly so. A part of her heart welcomed the invitation. It had been nearly 3 weeks since she'd last seen him in person. Their schedules an unending conflict of briefings, travel, and midnight phone calls that always ended too soon. A small, involuntary smile crept across her lips as she typed back, Make it 6 p.m. I have to leave tonight. Message sent. Several blocks away, Robert looked down at his phone. The moment he read her reply, his features shifted ever so slightly. The confident charm faded, replaced by something colder. Analytical. Concern flickered in his eyes for a beat, before his expression reset, like a mask slipping back into place. Robert and Maria had been together long enough for him to understand the nature of her work, cloaked in confidentiality, anchored in duty, and always demanding. He never pried for details. He had learned early on that her silence wasn't avoidance, it was discipline. She had one of those jobs that didn't clock out at 5, didn't pause for holidays or anniversaries. Her commitment was total, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Still, this time something felt off. He stared at her text, make it 6 p.m. I have to leave tonight, reading it twice, then a third time. A quiet unease settled in his gut. Maria was methodical. She didn't do sudden departures. Even with classified missions, there was usually a full day's notice, sometimes 2. She would tell him just enough to manage expectations. I'll be out of reach for a few days or can't say where I'm going, but I'll be safe. But this time there had been no warning, no build-up. Just a last-minute schedule shift and a tight-lipped tone in her message. He set the phone down slowly, staring at nothing in particular, his mind already working behind his eyes. If this truly was business as usual, she would have said more. But she hadn't. And that meant either she didn't know what she was walking into, or someone didn't want her to. Either way, his instincts told him one thing with absolute clarity. Something was about to change. La Grande Boucherie, 6 p.m. The black Chevrolet Suburban pulled up to La Grande Boucherie at exactly 6:56 p.m., its polished exterior reflecting the warm glow of the restaurant's golden lighting and the movement of pedestrians on the boulevard. Snow from earlier in the day clung to the edges of the curb, melting in quiet rivulets beneath the tires. The driver stepped out quickly, but the restaurant's concierge was already moving toward the rear passenger door, his gloved hand reaching for the handle. He opened it smoothly. Good evening, Ms. Romano. Mr. Walton has already arrived and is waiting for you inside, he said with a practiced smile and slight bow. Maria adjusted the lapel of her wool coat and accepted the concierge's hand as she stepped out, her heels clicking lightly against the pavement. She looked poised, composed, but inside, her pulse was steady with controlled tension. Thank you, she responded, her voice calm but clipped. As she entered the restaurant, the scent of roasted garlic, fine wine, and wood smoke wrapped around her like a second coat. Soft jazz played under the low murmur of evening conversation. She spotted Robert, already seated in their usual booth near the tall arched window, a glass of wine untouched in front of him. He stood as she approached, a warm smile blooming across his face. You're stunning, he said, lightly kissing her cheek before they sat. You're not so bad yourself, she replied, smoothing her napkin onto her lap. A brief silence settled in. Then Robert leaned in slightly. So, what's going on? You said you're leaving tonight? Maria met his gaze, choosing her words carefully. I got called up for an inspection. It's a joint operations site in Kotka, Finland, the one attached to Swartz Global Shipping. His brow lifted just slightly. That's sudden. Everything about it is, she said, lifting her water glass but not drinking. There was an anomaly unsanctioned signal sweep. The 4th floor houses a sensitive compartmented information facility. They're not sure if it's a technical glitch, or something worse. Robert leaned back slightly, as if measuring her or perhaps reassessing what she knew. And they sent you. They trust me, Maria replied simply. Which means if it is a breach, they'll want eyes on it that don't flinch. He gave a slow nod, the corners of his mouth tightening. Be careful, that part of the world is complicated. Maria smiled faintly, her eyes hardening just a fraction. You have no idea. For a moment, neither spoke. The clinking of crystal and silverware filled the space between them, and somewhere deep inside her, Maria already knew this trip was not going to be a routine inspection. And Robert knew far more than he was letting on. Maria took a sip of her wine and set the glass down gently, her eyes studying Robert's face across the flickering candlelight. There was something in his posture, relaxed, yet too perfectly so. His fingers tapped absent-mindedly against the base of his glass, but his smile was practiced, measured. She leaned in slightly, keeping her tone casual. So what do you have planned for the next few weeks? Robert gave a small shrug, his expression neutral. As of right now, nothing unusual, just the everyday grind at the office. We've been stuck in conference rooms, back-to-back meetings. My team's knee-deep in a merger with 2 overseas research firms. Both are exploring quantum computing applications for financial encryption models. Maria raised an eyebrow. Quantum computing? Sounds expensive. He chuckled lightly. It is. But if the numbers are right, it could change the game in secure transactions. Real-time encryption breaking, predictive modeling, even algorithmic portfolio management that adapts on its own. The usual science fiction becoming reality type stuff. He sipped his wine, then added more casually. We've got a lot of lawyers involved, which tells me we're either close to closing, or close to walking away. Maria smiled politely, but inside her mind was racing. He was giving her just enough to sound legitimate vague jargon, high-level terms but no real substance. She'd been around too many briefings and interrogations not to recognize a rehearsed cover when she heard one. Robert had always been confident, always articulate, but tonight he was something else. Careful, too careful. She nodded as if satisfied, but her eyes lingered on him a moment longer than necessary. Sounds intense. You'll probably need a vacation when it's over. Robert smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. Maybe somewhere warmer, you could come. Maria returned the smile. This time it was hers that didn't reach her eyes. Maybe, she said softly. She shifted her gaze momentarily to the window beside their table, watching the snowflakes tumble lazily beneath the soft golden glow of the street lamps outside. In that moment, her instincts were screaming at her. Something about Robert wasn't aligning. His words, his timing, the way his eyes lingered just a second too long when she mentioned her assignment in Kotka. She couldn't ignore the subtle changes in his demeanor, the small cracks forming in a mask she hadn't even realized he was wearing. But now wasn't the time to spiral into doubt. She inhaled slowly and forced herself to push the unease down, locking it behind the same mental doors she used during interrogations and high-security debriefs. She reminded herself of what was at stake, a potential breach in one of the most sensitive signal intelligence collection sites in Europe, the possibility of internal compromise, the delicate dance of joint intelligence work in a region bristling with geopolitical tension. She was being trusted to assess the situation, report with precision, and act if necessary. She could worry about Robert later. Whatever suspicion she was feeling, whatever crackle of mistrust had just flared to life would have to wait. She needed her head clear. Her emotions shelved. The mission came first. Always. And when she returned, if this mission didn't break her, if she wasn't walking into something meant to destroy her, then she'd start digging. Quietly. Thoroughly. She'd gather more information, analyze every word, every movement, every unexplained coincidence in their relationship. She would find the truth. But for now, she smiled, nodded at something he said, and reminded herself, focus on the mission, trust nothing, and survive. Maria glanced down at her watch. Time was moving faster than she liked. The dinner had gone smoothly on the surface, but every word, every look exchanged between her and Robert had left a lingering residue of doubt. The charm he wore like a tailored suit had felt just a little too polished tonight. Her instincts, trained through years of subtle deception detection, were on edge. She folded her napkin neatly and placed it beside her plate, then looked up at him with a measured expression. Can you take me to the airport? She asked, her voice soft, casual, too casual. Robert smiled without hesitation. Of course. Maria nodded. Thanks, my flight leaves at 9 p.m. from Dulles. He took a sip of his wine and set the glass down, his movement smooth and unhurried, but his eyes studied her with faint curiosity. Cutting it close, aren't you? Not really, she replied, standing and slipping her coat over her shoulders. I travel light. Besides, the sooner I'm wheels up, the sooner I can get to the bottom of this. Robert stood as well, holding her coat at the shoulders for just a second longer than necessary. You always did like to be first in, last out. Maria gave him a small smile, though it never touched her eyes. Comes with the job. As they walked out into the cold night air, snowflakes falling in slow spirals around them, Maria kept her stride even, her expression unreadable. But inside, her thoughts were racing. Kotka, Finland, Swartz Global Shipping. Snow whipped fiercely against the tinted glass of the Swartz Global Shipping Complex, the wind howling through the narrow gaps between buildings like a warning whispered in a forgotten language. The Finnish winter had arrived in full force, blanketing Kotka in thick layers of white and turning the industrial park into a silent fortress of steel and ice. Maria pulled her parka tight around her body, the high collar brushing against her jawline as she lowered her head against the wind. The cold bit at her exposed cheeks, but her eyes remained sharp and forward-focused. Every step across the frozen pavement crunched beneath her boots with precision. She didn't rush. She couldn't afford to haste was a liability in her line of work. Reaching the rear service entrance, She paused just long enough to let the biometric scanner read her ID badge. The small green light blinked in acknowledgement, and the heavy metal door released with a low mechanical click. Inside, the air was dry and sterile, humming with the quiet pulse of machines, servers, and fluorescent lights. The stark contrast from the freezing storm outside only made the interior feel more clinical, more controlled, and somehow more unsettling. Two armed guards stood just inside, dressed in black tactical gear. Their MCX Spear LTIR 300 rifles were slung across their chests in a relaxed but ready posture. Without a word, he eyed her credentials, nodded, and stepped aside. Maria gave a curt nod in return and stepped into the heart of the facility. On the outside, it looked like just another shipping company tucked away in a frigid corner of the Baltic. But she knew better. 2 stories of mundane logistics masked 2 more stories of highly classified operations. What Swartz Global Shipping really trafficked in wasn't cargo, but intelligence. Digital whispers pulled from the air, from the sea, from Russian comms channels that never knew they were being heard. And now one of those whispers had gotten too loud. Maria's boots echoed on the tile as she made her way toward the elevator. She had a job to do, and someone in this building might already know she was coming. Maria immediately made her way through the internal corridor, bypassing the bustling activity of the lower administrative floors. She walked with purpose, heading toward the elevators reserved exclusively for NSA and DIA personnel, those with high-level clearances and a need-to-know directive. There was no external sign to mark the access point, just a smooth section of wall with brushed steel paneling and a single black button. She reached into her coat and pulled out her ID badge, scanning it over a specific seam in the wall, an invisible electronic ID reader embedded behind the panel. To the untrained eye, it was nothing more than architectural design. But to those cleared to be here, it was one of many layers of compartmentalized security. The scanner chirped softly. A small green dot blinked once, then faded. Maria pressed the up button. The elevator arrived within seconds, its stainless steel doors parting in silence. She stepped inside and selected the 4th floor, an access-controlled level where the cover peeled away, revealing the facility's true purpose: surveillance, signals intelligence, and deep black operations tracking Russian military activity across the Baltic Sea. As the elevator ascended, she adjusted her gloves and smoothed the front of her parka, checking herself briefly in the mirrored panel. Her face was calm, composed, but her mind was a battlefield of questions and contingencies. 36 hours ago, someone had either tested the system or tried to break it. The elevator doors slid open, revealing a quiet, climate-controlled hallway of reinforced concrete, acoustic suppression panels, and red-lit security cameras. Director Frederick Mayer stood just outside, waiting with hands clasped behind his back. His tailored gray suit was pressed and crisp, but the tension in his shoulders betrayed the urgency of the situation. "Ms. Romano?" he asked as she stepped out. "Yes, sir," she replied, coming to a smooth stop before him. Mayer nodded once. "Walk with me." They moved together down the corridor, passing a row of closed doors labeled only with alphanumeric codes. He didn't waste time with small talk. 36 hours ago, he began, we detected a faint signal sweep originating from within this building, 4th floor, one of our restricted compartments. No scheduled diagnostics, no approved testing. The digital signature matched nothing on our registry. That alone flagged it. But here's the problem: it wasn't just a blip. He stopped in front of a secure door and turned to face her. "We believe someone inside attempted to initiate a low-frequency burst transmission. Minimal packet size, but encrypted and masked. The kind of thing you wouldn't notice unless you were looking for it." Maria's brow furrowed slightly. "Any idea what the target was?" Mayer's expression tightened. "We don't know. That's the part that's either encouraging or deeply alarming. Nothing appears to have left the system, but the attempt was deliberate. Someone knew what they were doing." He lowered his voice. "We have 2 working theories. Either someone on the inside is being turned or someone from the outside has found a way to compromise our personnel." They reached a conference room, and he opened the door for her. She stepped inside. The lights were already on. A digital map of the facility's interior glowed on the screen at the far end of the room. Mayer followed behind her, closing the door. "Your job, Ms. Romano, is to confirm which of those theories we're dealing with and identify the point of failure before it becomes a disaster. I need a full, sensitive, compartmented information facility inspection, clearance protocol audit, and review of all personnel with elevated access. Quietly. We can't afford a panic, and we certainly can't afford to tip off the suspect, if there is one." Maria gave a single nod. "Understood." He studied her for a moment, We requested you because you've seen this kind of thing before. You'll know where to look. I'll get started immediately, she said, her voice steady. As she turned toward the data console, Mayer added, almost as an afterthought, and Ms. Romano, if this is an inside job, you're walking into a hornet's nest. She paused, then looked over her shoulder. Good, I brought the smoke. For the next 2 weeks, Maria descended into a meticulous rhythm of pattern, born of years spent threading the needle between policy, security, and instinct. She worked long hours, often alone, methodically dissecting the inner workings of the Swartz Global Shipping black site, like a surgeon examining tissue for signs of disease. Her days became a blur of access logs, security clearances, digital audit trails, and inspection reports. She moved from one compartmentalized, sensitive compartmented information facility to another, clipboard in hand, gloves on, hair pulled back in a tight bun. She checked every door reader, ran diagnostics on biometric scanners, verified magnetic lock activity, and matched entry logs with personnel rosters. She triple-checked air-gapped servers and physical backups stored in the Faraday cabinets. Nothing was assumed, nothing overlooked, yet something still felt wrong. It wasn't just the silence of the place. Black sites were always sterile, quiet and lifeless on the surface. It was something beneath the silence, a pressure, a sense of eyes watching her where there shouldn't have been any. On the 3rd floor, she found a tampered security latch on a classified equipment locker. It had been resealed, sloppy work. She documented it and filed it under internal maintenance review. A mistake? Or a message? Then came the anomaly. On the 4th floor, Terminal 4B22, part of the Tier 2 analytics cluster, used to process intercepted Russian maritime transmissions, showed activity in its command log. The timestamp read 3 days prior. The usage window lasted 11 minutes and 26 seconds. But no one had signed the terminal out. Maria stared at the empty digital ledger, frowning. Every use of that terminal required dual authentication, a badge swipe, and a biometric hand scan. According to the server logs, both were successful. But the username 1, assigned to a former systems engineer who had rotated back to NSA headquarters 2 months ago, should have been deactivated. Her stomach tightened. She flagged the incident in an encrypted field report to Director Mayer, marked it as IRP1 Incident Report, Priority 1, and isolated the terminal from the network with a physical airlock protocol. Then, without missing a beat, she kept moving. Whoever had accessed that terminal knew what they were doing. They hadn't tripped any immediate alarms, which meant it wasn't an amateur. Someone had covered their tracks. But not well enough, and Maria had just found the first crack. Helsinki, Finland, St. George Hotel. Maria had been in Kotka for 2 weeks. The rhythm of the site inspection had dulled her sense of time. Early mornings, long days reviewing access logs, confirming air-gapped system integrity, rotating passwords, and quietly observing the behavior of personnel at Swartz Global Shipping. Her presence was not welcomed by all, but no one openly challenged her. The cold Finnish winter and layers of bureaucratic silence gave everything a muted clinical feel. During that time, she'd had minimal contact with DIA headquarters or with Robert. That wasn't unusual. DIA site inspections often required isolation, limited communication, and strict adherence to compartmentalization protocols. She'd been on dozens like this before, and yet something about this one felt different. As Maria stepped out of the reinforced service exit and into the biting wind, her breath crystallizing in the air, her phone began to buzz in her coat pocket. She pulled it out with gloved hands. A text message lit up the screen, bright and unexpected against the gray backdrop of her day. I am in town. Dinner tonight, just us, Helsinki, same place we stayed last spring. Maria stopped in her tracks. Her fingers tightened around the phone as a cold ripple ran through her. Not from the wind this time. Robert was in Finland? Why was he? Their last conversations had been brief and sporadic. Work had kept them both busy. But Helsinki, the same hotel they'd shared last spring. That wasn't a coincidence. It felt orchestrated, calculated. Her instincts flared. Years of counterintelligence training sharpened her thoughts. Location, motive, deviation from pattern, how he was at dinner before she left. Every part of her professional mind whispered caution. Every part of her personal life whispered just go. She stared at the message a moment longer. Then she typed a short reply. 8 p.m. Don't be late. She didn't know if it was curiosity, fear, or hope that made her press send. But the moment she did, she felt the quiet weight of a decision settle over her shoulders like fresh snow. Candlelight flickered across the crisp white linen of the Winter Garden bar and restaurant, casting soft amber shadows on the table. The quiet murmur of clinking glassware, low conversation, and ambient jazz piano filled the refined space. Outside, Helsinki's winter pressed against the tall windows in sheets of ice and fog. Maria sat alone, her posture straight but not stiff, her expression composed at least outwardly. A half-full glass of red wine rested in front of her, untouched since her first sip. Her black coat, still dusted faintly with snow, was draped over the back of the chair beside her like a second guest. She checked her watch. 7:59 p.m. Then the front door opened with a gentle chime. Robert walked in. Only it wasn't Robert, not the man she remembered. There was a shift, not just in him, but in the atmosphere around him. He moved like someone who had cleared rooms for a living. Back straight, chin level, eyes alert. There was no warmth in his stride. No hint of the soft-spoken, wine-drinking consultant who had once traced lazy circles on her back in bed, while whispering about weekend getaways to Portugal. His blue eyes swept the restaurant like radar, calculating exits, memorizing faces, assessing threats. When he approached, he didn't smile, didn't lean in, didn't kiss her cheek. He just pulled out the chair and sat down across from her. Maria swallowed hard. "I've missed you," she said quietly, trying to anchor the moment in something human. His voice came, but it was wrong, duller, heavier, tinted with something colder, Eastern. "We don't have much time." She blinked. "Excuse me?" His tone was flat, professional. 3 years ago I was ordered to target you. The directive was simple: initiate contact, build trust, develop a relationship, extract what we needed. You know how it goes. Her mouth parted slightly, but no words came. The meaning hit her like ice water down the spine. He continued, emotionless. "My name is Yuri Ivanovich Nosenko, FSB Director at Sea. Your facility in Kotka has been compromised for over a year. I need files, transmission logs, all data passed through sensitive compartmented information facility channels related to Baltic intercepts. You will collect it and deliver it to me." Maria's composure cracked. "You motherfucker." Her voice came out louder than intended, sharp and cutting. A few nearby patrons turned their heads. A waiter behind the bar paused mid-step. Yuri didn't flinch. "I need you to calm down and listen, very carefully." His voice dropped, now unmistakably Russian. Each word was ice and iron. He reached into his coat, withdrew a small envelope and slid it across the table with 2 fingers. It was matte black, unmarked. Inside, a photo. Her mother standing in line at a farmer's market in Rockville, Maryland, bundled in a coat and holding a canvas grocery bag. The timestamp in the corner was from 2 days ago. Maria stared at it, her pulse thudding in her ears. "You've been watched," Yuri said. "You were selected long before we ever met, and now you're in a position to be useful." She looked up, rage simmering behind her eyes. "You bastard," he replied, quiet and cold. "This isn't personal. This is systemic. You've already been turned, Maria, you just didn't realize it. Now you have a choice. Finish the job or force us to finish it for you. You have 1 hour to decide. Send a text message with 782 from this phone within the hour indicating you will comply." Yuri reached into his pocket and handed Maria a burner flip phone. Untraceable, she could feel her throat tighten, her vision blurring from the heat of betrayal. Her fingers gripped the edge of the table just to stay grounded. Without another word, Yuri stood, buttoned his coat, and turned away. By the time the waiter returned with the wine list, he was gone. Maria didn't move. The candle danced on the table, casting long shadows over her untouched glass. Her breath became shallow, like she was drowning above water, and for the first time in her career, Maria Angela Romano realized she was no longer the hunter. She was the asset. Hotel Merikotka, back in her hotel room. The moment the door latched shut behind her, Maria collapsed. She didn't sit. She didn't walk. She dropped to her knees to the floor, palms to the carpet, head bowed as if in silent prayer. And then the tears came, not the silent, elegant kind seen in movies. These were raw, guttural sobs, the kind that rose from somewhere deeper than the heart, somewhere sacred, ruptured by betrayal. Her shoulders shook uncontrollably as wave after wave of emotion poured out. Rage, humiliation, grief. Everything she'd built, every sacrifice, every sleepless night reviewing intelligence briefings, every mission she'd risked her life for had been used against her. Her loyalty, her discipline, her love of country, weaponized by him. She crawled to the edge of the bed and sat back on her heels, hands trembling. Her eyes were red and swollen, but her mind was catching fire. She replayed everything. Every kiss, every late-night conversation, every whispered promise under Washington stars. Every detail of her life with Robert or Yuri was now tainted. What once felt intimate was now tactical, strategic. He'd studied her like an operation, used her like an asset, and she'd let him in. But she wasn't broken. Through clenched teeth and tear-streaked cheeks, Maria whispered almost in prayer, "You picked the wrong woman." The shaking stopped. Her breath slowed. Something inside her clicked cold, precise, sharp-edged. She wiped her eyes, stood, and walked with purpose to the closet safe. Inside, beneath a false bottom, sat her secure laptop. She placed it on the desk, closed the blackout curtains, and powered up the encrypted terminal. If he wanted a mole, she'd give him one. On paper, she began crafting a personal deception plan. Methodical, surgical. Step 1. Earn his trust. Feed him scraps. Simulate compliance. Make him believe she turned. Step 2. Identify surveillance. Locate handlers. Map the threat network. Step 3. End him. She opened a secure channel to a classified DIA sandbox and began constructing a decoy dataset using outdated but convincing sensitive compartmented information facility traffic logs. Simultaneously, she ran a keyword query for Yuri Ivanovich Nosenko across known FSB assets and covert travel manifests. Matches began to appear. Good. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. Her mind a steel trap now. He wanted a mission. He'd just given her one, and this time, she would be the one writing the ending. Maria stared at the black burner phone for a long time. It sat on the nightstand like a loaded gun, silent, inert, but humming with consequence. She hadn't touched it since he slipped it into her coat pocket at the restaurant. A simple device. No logos. No GPS. No way to trace it. Only one programmed function. Obedience. Her fingers hovered over it as if it might bite. She knew what pressing those digits meant. She knew what he wanted it to mean. That she was his. That the trap had closed. That the American intelligence officer, the inspector, the investigator, had been turned. And in the eyes of anyone monitoring that call log, she would be. A trembling breath escaped her lips. Her thumb pressed the power button. The screen blinked to life, cold and sterile. No contacts, no timestamp, just a ready prompt. Maria typed the code. 72. She hesitated. Her thumb hovered over send. This was the threshold. Then she pressed it. The signal sent in under a second. No ring. No confirmation, just a blank screen again. But the message was received. She was now, in the eyes of the FSB, his asset. Maria slowly set the phone down, eyes fixed on it like it might whisper something back. She stood, spine straightening, face blank. But behind her eyes the fire burned hotter than ever. He thought he had her. Now he'd have no idea what she was truly capable of. Swartz Global Shipping. The next morning, Maria entered the SIGINT facility just after dawn. The Arctic light outside was soft and blue, casting long shadows across the snow-dusted parking lot. But inside, the fluorescent world of security protocols, secure access points, and badge-enforced silence hummed to life with military precision. Maria's posture was sharp, her expression unreadable, composed, detached, professional. To everyone else she looked exactly as she should. The visiting DIA inspector, wrapping up a routine site evaluation. Her clearance carried weight, and her face, well known in the interagency world, drew polite nods from technicians and analysts as she moved between sectors. But Maria wasn't just inspecting anymore. She was hunting. She moved deliberately, floor to floor, clipboard in hand, posture fluid but alert. Every console she reviewed, every door log she verified was one more piece in the puzzle she was now building. Behind every interaction was a scan of posture, tone, eye contact. She logged not just network activity, but people. Who lingered near terminals they shouldn't, who avoided her gaze, who seemed to glance a second too long at the badge around her neck. One of you sold this place out, she thought, and I'm going to find you. By 0730, she was outside Director Frederick Mayer's office on the 4th floor. She smoothed the front of her navy blue blazer, inhaled deeply, then knocked twice. "Come in," came the familiar baritone voice. She stepped inside. "Maria, good morning," Mayer said, looking up from a classified terminal. "You're early." "Inspection's nearly complete," she replied with practiced calm. "Minor protocol issues, couple of log discrepancies, and a firewall patch that was 3 days late. Nothing systemic." He leaned back in his chair, nodding. "Excellent. Send me the final report by end of day. We'll route it through Langley." She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a small white card, standard business card stock, but crisp and fresh. She placed it face down on his desk. "Just in case you lost the first one, my contact info." He raised an eyebrow, a smile tugging faintly at the corner of his mouth. "I still have it, Maria. No worries, she said casually, already turning to leave. Keep this one too. He picked it up as she walked toward the door. And then he flipped it over. Written in block black ink, deliberately spaced. Too many eyes in the room. No name, no elaboration, just one phrase. Mayer's smile vanished. His eyes narrowed. He knew what this phrase meant. Intelligence agencies use code words or phrases to indicate serious breaches of security, and he was just warned of one. When he looked up again, Maria was gone. She walked briskly back down the hall, heart pounding beneath her calm exterior. No one stopped her. No one suspected. She had just alerted the director of a counterintelligence breach. The game had changed. And the first move was hers. DIA and NSA response coordination. Mayer pushed back from his desk. The moment Maria slipped out of sight. He didn't hurry. Didn't glance at the card again. Didn't let his expression change. In this building, especially now, he understood that every move could be under a microscope. Cameras, eyes, ears. There could be one leak, or there could be three. And if whoever was watching caught the slightest shift in his behavior, both he and Maria could be finished before the day was out. One wrong move, one signal that he knew what she'd just told him, and they were dead. So Mayer played his part. He rose from his chair in a fluid, unremarkable motion, stretching his back like a man breaking from paperwork. He strolled toward the door, nodding to a passing IT tech. Taking a quick break, he murmured, his tone as casual as if he were commenting on the weather. The hallway outside was its usual low hum of keyboards, murmured conversations, and the faint hiss of the HVAC system. He walked with an easy gait, hands in his pockets, not hurrying but not lingering either. The restrooms were just ahead. As he passed a young analyst, he gave a polite offhand smile. Stepping out for a minute, he said, the lie simple and unremarkable. The elevators were across from the restrooms. He pressed the button without hesitation, eyes on the illuminated floor indicators above. The doors slid open and he stepped inside alone, swiping his badge and entering the code for basement access with the same casual efficiency he'd used 100 times before. The ride down was silent, except for the soft mechanical hum of the lift. When the doors opened, the air changed cooler, drier. The basement level wasn't a place people visited without reason. To the right, a long corridor stretched ahead, lined with cinder block walls painted in a utilitarian gray. Overhead, the fluorescent lights cast a faint, steady buzz. Mayer turned right. His footsteps echoed lightly as he passed security cameras and reinforced access points. At the end of the corridor stood the server room entrance. Two massive brushed metal doors, locked behind multi-factor authentication. He pulled his badge from his pocket and swiped, the red light blinking green. The heavy latch clicked. He pushed the doors open, stepping into the low, constant drone of cooling fans. Rows of server racks stood like sentinels, blue and amber lights winking in the dim. Maria was already there, standing between two aisles, her face calm but her eyes sharp. "Mayor," she said quietly, no smile, no preamble. He closed the door behind him with a solid metallic thud, sealing them in the cold, humming silence. Now finally they could speak. Mayer stepped closer, his expression a controlled mask, but his voice edged with restrained urgency. "What the hell is going on, Maria?" His tone carried both irritation and concern, the kind that came from knowing a situation was already dangerous before he had any facts. Maria's mouth was dry. She opened it, but for a moment nothing came out. Then, "My boyfriend," she managed, her voice low. Mayer's eyes narrowed. "Robert." She nodded once. "Yes, he's an FSB agent." Mayer stared at her, blinking slowly as the words settled in. His jaw tightened. "Jesus Christ, Maria." She pressed on before he could say more. "His real name is Yuri Ivanovich Nosenko, Director at C. Last night he told me the truth, or his version of it. He's been targeting me for 3 years. Our relationship, every trip, every conversation. It was all part of an operation." Her voice faltered for a heartbeat, but she forced herself to continue. "He wants intelligence from me, specifically transmission logs. All sensitive compartmented information facility traffic related to Baltic ship intercepts. Every single packet that's been routed through this facility." Mayer swore under his breath. "That's Tier 1 classified. If the Russians—" "I know," she cut in sharply. "I know exactly what it is, and he's using leverage to make sure I cooperate." Her hand dipped into her blazer pocket, pulling out a small photograph. She handed it to him. It was a candid shot of a woman in her late 60s, wearing a winter coat, holding a grocery bag at a farmer's market. The timestamp in the corner read 48 hours ago. The location data in the corner was unmistakable. Rockville, Maryland. "My mother," Maria said, her voice tight. "They know exactly where she is. He made it very clear what would happen if I refused. Myers stared at the image for a long moment, then looked back up at her. The irritation in his face had given way to something colder, calculating. You believe him? Maria's eyes hardened. I don't have the luxury not to. They've been watching her, watching me. He said I was already turned, whether I realized it or not. Mayer exhaled slowly, setting the photo down on a nearby console. And what did you tell him? That I'd do it, she said flatly. Because I wanted him to believe it. I needed time to figure out my next move. His brow furrowed. And your next move? She met his gaze, steady and unflinching. We make him think I'm working for him. We feed him what we choose. And when the timing is right, we end his operation, and him. The server fans hummed on, indifferent witnesses to a conversation that could cost both of them their lives. Mayer gave a single measured nod. Then let's make sure we stay 3 moves ahead. Mayer left the server room first. The walk back to his office was slow, deliberate. Just another senior officer making his morning rounds. He exchanged a few casual greetings, even paused at one workstation to review an analyst's screen for a moment, masking the fact that his mind was already working 3 steps ahead. Inside, he closed his office door with a calm hand, sat down, and pulled a secured handset from his top drawer. He keyed in a series of authentication codes before the line came alive, routing through a hardened NSA DIA encryption tunnel. His voice was even, clinical, as if he were logging a routine maintenance update. But the content was anything but routine. The warning triggered an immediate classified alert to the Joint Security Coordination Cell, the standing interagency team for critical breaches and counterintelligence emergencies. The alert was automatically assigned a red flag Tier 1 classification, meaning only cleared personnel at the highest levels could see it. Mayer's internal incident report carried the subject line. Protocol line Zulu 5 initiated. Possible internal compromise with external coercion. The body was brief, but precise. Preliminary indication of DIA personnel under foreign intelligence coercion. Potential hostile state actor, Russian Federation, FSB Directorate C. Subject currently in operational contact with hostile party. Details to follow. He included only the essentials, no names, no operational specifics, knowing full well that the fewer details on an initial blast, the harder it would be for any internal leak to trace the alert back to Maria. The final line read, "Further information will be provided once verified and collected." Once the message was sent, Mayer leaned back, his jaw tight, the hum of the secure line fading in his ears. Down in the sensitive compartmented information facility levels, Maria continued her work as though nothing had changed. She reviewed system logs, checked access controls, and signed off on minor procedural corrections, her hands steady and her expression neutral. Inside, every moment was a balancing act. Keep the routine, watch the room, and wait for Yuri's next move. And when he reached out again, she would be ready. Ready for him to believe she was his. Ready to turn the game against him.